Welcome to Politics NY with Skye, Schneps Media's new series, Lifting the Curtain, where we are lifting the curtain and going behind the scenes of state and local government. And right now, I'm with Jordan Barowitz. He's going to give us a real estate perspective on the city. He is a vice president of public affairs at the Durst Organization, and he has his buildings on display behind him.
Hi, Skye. How are you?
It's great to see you, Jordan. How are you?
Nice to be here.
Yes. So tell us, you want to start with just an overview now, maybe with this new mayor coming into power, how you think the state of real estate will change, or maybe is it COVID actually that's changed it the most?
Well, there's no doubt that COVID has had a big impact on the market. I think things are definitely bouncing back and getting better. Certainly, the retail sector got hit probably the hardest, and that's going to take the longest time to come back. There's a lot of energy in the city. A lot of people are out on the streets, and it's great. But when you walk down side streets in like Midtown and downtown, you see a lot of shuttered stores and restaurants. So, and that's going to take a little bit of time for those businesses to come back. The residential market is definitely bouncing back. When COVID first hit, you saw rents drop significantly, you saw vacancies increase significantly, and you saw arrears increase significantly. Arrears and vacancies have sort of come back to normal levels, excuse me. Rents are down significantly. They're still down in the 15 to 20% range, residential rents. So that's, as more people come back to the city, hopefully we get more demand and rents will bounce back up from our perspective. It's a good time to be a tenant.
Right. But back to the commercial side, and I'm thinking of your office, the Durst building in Midtown, right? And that's where my office was too. That whole area had a bunch of restaurants, like fast food lunch type places that catered to the Midtown Manhattan working crowd. And I can only imagine that a lot of those places have since shut because people aren't filling up the office buildings like they used to.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We're just starting to see some momentum this summer on people coming back into the office, and it's growing. We think that over the next few months, people are like dipping their toes and coming back in. There's like very flexible schedules, and people, it's voluntary, and workers are coming back to sort of see what it's like. And then in September, there's going to be like a more sort of wholesale return to the office, as schools reopen. It's interesting that the Sweet Green on 42nd Street near 6th Avenue, when I got back to the office, we're a real estate company, so we've been back in the office since a year ago, July. I walked into the Sweet Green back then, and I was the only person in the store, literally the only person in the store.
Wow.
Today, I went out to get a salad, and I couldn't because the line to get a salad was out the door and around the block, and it was like a 20 or 25 minute wait. And I think that there's this, there's a supply and demand thing going on. All of a sudden, there's a lot more people. So the places that are open, are starting to get really busy and really crowded. But there's still like not a lot of places that are open. So, and then, there's some barriers to entry to opening up a business. You need the capital to pay the rent, to buy the inventory, you have to hire everybody. So it's like there's going to be a little bit of like, a little adjustment period as the supply and demand equation equates.
Now, what about these big tenants of office spaces, like law firms or like real estate firms that had all this office space and employees now that aren't planning on coming back 5 days a week?
Well, it's a big question, and it's going to take a little while for it to untangle. But we're starting to hear from people is that some form of remote work is going to be the standard for most companies, at least initially. But it doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to be taking less space. Turns out people want to work Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And everybody wants to be in Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and wants to work remotely Monday and Friday. Imagine that, right? So that because everybody's in the office at the same time, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, means you can't have any less space, right? If you have less space, then there's no place to put people when they're there Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So a number of companies that we've talked to, even when they start giving people a day or two off from the office to work remotely, their space needs end up being the same. Now, this is all going to flush out over the next couple of years, and as people sort of see how well work from home happens. But an interesting anecdote just from our business, we had a meeting today in person on one of our development projects, a very complicated project we're working on in Philadelphia. And we were all in the room together for the first time. We've been in the office for a year. People have been on a 50-50 schedule, so we weren't having really in-person meetings. Today, it's the first time everybody was there together. And there was so much more participation in the meetings from people. When you're on a Zoom meeting, it's like one person is sort of like doing the majority of the talking, and then like people sort of like zone out, or like you can't wait for the meeting to be over, or looking at the emails, and a lot of stuff just sort of gets missed. But when everybody's in person, the level of interaction and activity is like fourfold what it was on Zoom. And like, we got so much more done, and like dots were being connected. And I think once, people start to experience that and they see the benefit of being together, that like a lot of this like fervor about remote work is gonna subside.
Yeah, I think people are eager to get back in person. But when you're talking to these different companies that are looking to take space in the heart of the city versus elsewhere, I wonder if there are incentives for companies to come in the cities where there were historically a massive amount of workforce, but people might not want to feel that way this time.
Yeah, it's hard to get people off the couch, right? It's certainly, there are some luxuries about like not having to commute and not having to get yourself all gussied up when you leave the house. And so to compete with that, I think companies are going to have to make their space, their office space, worth coming to. I think that the days of like sort of like cramming as many possible people into a space, on bench seating with people just absolutely on top of each other, are probably going to be over. As people realize that it's like really not an effective or healthy or productive way to work, and the employees are going to demand that the workspaces be of a higher quality. Because one thing we learned about COVID, right, is anybody can get COVID, right? It's an equal opportunity virus. However, it doesn't affect each population the same way, right? Unfortunately, people of color, lower income people were disproportionately impacted by COVID. And when you think about like populations that live in overcrowded housing, like some of the zip codes around Corona, Queens, which had the highest rates of COVID in the city, or some job titles like the TWU and the transit workers were like really impacted by COVID, way beyond their numbers. And if you think about it, it's like their work environment is tough. Like we work underground. There's not a lot of fresh and clean air. It can be dirty and noisy and dusty. Those populations got COVID at rates higher than others. And I think there's going to be a greater understanding and emphasis put on creating spaces where people are healthier and more resistant to not just COVID, but run-of-the-mill viruses.
And that trend sounds similar to what we're seeing in residential spaces as well, with some of these buildings that have all the amenities. So you have the washer dryer, you have shared space, you have a gym building, parking in the building, all the amenities.
Yeah, I mean, you have to make buildings places to people to live that they're happy. And then it's not just the amenities, it's also a lot about, there's a greater emphasis on the quality of the indoor environment, everything from the level of filtration of the air that you get into your apartment, the quality of the mechanical system, so that the air conditioning isn't, a loud blower that keeps you up at night and you don't sleep well from, June to September. The materials that go into building the apartments, that they don't off-gas noxious fumes and the apartment doesn't smell like a new car, right? These things are becoming more important to renters and consumers.
See, the way that you explained it, though, I feel like some millennials are discriminated against, because the way that you describe it sounds like this perfect environment that millennials need things like so in order to concentrate and do well, right? We need our sleep, we need our washer dryer, but it's true.
It's true. Yeah. No, it's about creating places where people are healthy and
Where
productive.
people are happy.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not just millennials, but I'm lucky enough to work in an office that has access to great light and great views and really, really high levels of filtration and lots of fresh and clean air, and CO2 monitors, that when you have a lot of people in a conference room and they're talking a lot, there's monitors that actually recognize that, pump more oxygen into the conference rooms. And I tell you, it's a lot better place to work. It sounds sort of goofy, but you just don't get tired after lunch. Most offices, you get tired after lunch.
That's what they do in casinos in Vegas.
Exactly. They pump oxygen into the room, and if it makes sense for gambling, it makes sense for working, right? And the reason that people get tired after lunch is they've eaten, so they're digesting their food, but also by the end of the day, there's no oxygen. The oxygen levels inside the offices have gone down because people have been breathing in the oxygen and expelling the CO2, and it makes you sleepy and tired. But if you work in an office that has a lot of oxygen, your energy level is high in the afternoon.
Now let's pivot really quick to politics, because I know
Sure.
Before your Durst role in your previous life, right, was with the Bloomberg administration and working in government. So
yeah.
What does the Eric Adams administration mean to you?
Well, we're really excited about the Democratic nominee. I don't want to put the cart before the horse.
Okay.
I think
if it's him or new government.
yes, we're hopeful that he'll be elected in November. I think Eric is I don't know him well, but I think he has a very pragmatic approach to government, and he understands that big problems need big solutions, and everybody needs to be involved in crafting those solutions. I can say that one of the frustrations for our industry is that we see ourselves as part of the solution to New York's problems. We are so invested in the city. Our businesses can't move, right? Like other businesses, they get up and move. Our buildings can't move. I don't have wheels on them. We're dedicated to the city. We love it. Our fortunes rise and fall with it. And we see ourselves as part of the solution. A lot of people recently have gotten a lot of mileage politically about making us the problem and the source of the problem. And that's very frustrating for us to be scapegoated as the source of everything that's wrong in New York City is the fault of the real estate industry.
Right.
And I think Eric has a much more holistic view of how you solve problems, which is you take all available resources, you take anybody who's willing to help, and you bring those people together. And that's how you move the city forward, as opposed to approaching it well, these people are my friends and these people are sort of okay with me and these people are naturally inclined to be against me. That's really counterproductive. When you look at the history of New York City, and when we've bounced back from crisis, which we have time and again, it's because there's ability to build this coalition of labor, of business, of left and right, and everybody comes together and gets the job done.
That's what we need to do. And you're right. There was this sentiment, an anti-real estate sentiment for quite some time. And hopefully things do come back to level now and everyone can play nicely together.
That would be great.
So thank you, Jordan. Thanks for your time.
Sure, my pleasure.
Being on Lifting the Curtain on PoliticsNY with Skye.
All right, great. I'll talk to you again soon.